According to our reporting, the European Union is laying out a 5-year plan when we consider investment across the continent to help rearm and restrain Russia. To what extent is the EIB involved in that broad investment that will clearly take years to realize?
Indeed, the European Investment Bank, as the financing arm of the European Union, has an important role to play in stepping up Europe's capabilities in the area of security and defense. There are many different needs, and we are very well placed to finance some key large infrastructures, critical infrastructures, military facilities, also research, production capacity, for example, drone manufacturing, and also financial support to small and medium-sized companies in the supply chain of large European contractors. It is unfortunate. I think that we are living this situation, but Europe has a very clear vision of where to go, and the European Investment Bank is helping get there.
Yeah, it's interesting that we're seeing a lot of these smaller defense companies, in some cases startups, that are reinventing the way that we look at this, and in some cases challenging the old line big defense contractors when it comes to different contracts. You mentioned drones, which is something that is a big deal here in the conversation about defense technology, that the EIB is ready to invest millions of euros in Europe's drone defenses. How would that be doled out, and how are you looking at that as a continent as opposed to a collection of countries?
Well, right now, we have a very robust pipeline of more than 30 flagship projects in the different areas I mentioned. But we're following very attentively the upcoming meeting of leaders, of prime ministers and presidents that will take place next week, the European Council meeting, to see what is their vision precisely when it comes to reinforcing the eastern border of the EU, also drone manufacturing and protection against enemy drones, etc. And we will be ready to help and support in those areas where we have most value added.
I can tell you that the president's phone call with Vladimir Putin has just ended.
Okay.
President, I just want to take a look at what he's writing here. He says, we've just concluded the telephone call, and it was a very productive one, says Donald Trump. President Putin congratulated me and the United States on the great accomplishment of peace in the Middle East, something that he said had been dreamed of for centuries. He goes on to try to connect the Middle East to the war in Ukraine here, even mentions the First Lady. Says they spent a lot of time talking about trade between Russia and the U.S. when the war with Ukraine is over, and said that at the conclusion of the call, we agreed that there will be a meeting of our high-level advisors next week. The United States initial meetings will be led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, together with various other people, to be designated, a meeting location to be determined. And then he says he and Putin will meet in an agreed-upon location, Budapest, Hungary, to see if we can bring this inglorious war to an end. He refers to the Zelensky meeting tomorrow, in which he will discuss his conversation with President Putin. So we have another meeting. Does this kind of talk sound productive to you, or more of the same?
Oh, well, I think it's very good to call this an inglorious war. This is Putin's war, a war of aggression, a war of choice. From the European Union's perspective, we want this war to finish as soon as possible. So whatever, can get us to a fair and stable peace, of course, it has to be fair and stable if we want it to be permanent, should be welcomed, of course.
When we consider the need for energy and the war over Russian oil, which I think is its own story altogether, would the EIB help cover Ukrainian purchases of U.S. LNG if that helped to end the war sooner?
We have just signed a 300 million deal with Ukraine. I had a meeting with the Prime Minister Sirvidenko yesterday. And we're looking into options to step it up even so that they can replenish their gas reserves for the winter. We are also supporting Ukraine when it comes to rebuilding critical infrastructures, including transport and energy. And we are supporting Ukraine when it comes to rebuilding supporting the daily lives of Ukrainians so that they can live lives that are as normal as possible, in this totally extraordinary and terrible circumstance, rebuilding hospitals, schools, kindergartens, protecting the infrastructure so that children can go to school. I think this is essential if we want to protect a strong basis for the recovery once the war is over.
There's so much that we can talk about that is depressing. The idea of rebuilding is the definition of optimism. And I'd love to hear how far you allow yourself to not only think about it, but to plan for it, because obviously this is a war that could end soon, and an enormous amount of work will be done and money required from governments and private industry. How far have you planned this out?
I am very grateful for your question, and I'm going to also smile, and I say,
absolutely.
I actually think I am very confident that Ukraine will bounce back very strongly once the war is over, because I have seen the determination, the resilience, the commitment of Ukrainians. I have also seen the very strong infrastructures of the country, and we have been supporting them for more than 2 years to make sure that the country has a strong basis on which to build this reconstruction, and also to pave the way for a successful accession to the European Union. So I am confident, we just need Putin to stop the war, and then we can move on to a new phase which can be more constructive.
Is rebuilding Ukraine years or decades?
I tend to think it's years. Actually, because we are talking about a country that continues to live a quite normal life, in these circumstances. The government has managed to keep a financial management which responds to a normal budget, to a normal administration, despite, of course, the immense needs that are related to the war. And so I think that the sooner we can move to the next phase, the better.
That is obviously a best case scenario, I guess, at this point. When it comes to European commitments like the one that we mentioned for buying U.S. LNG, do you want to see a matching commitment from the United States? Or do you think the administration has done what it can, at least financially speaking?
Well, right now, I think we all have to focus in supporting Ukraine. And obviously, military support is of the essence. European countries are clearly stepping up their support, not only to protect ourselves, to protect the European Union, but also to support Ukraine. Countries are taking quite novel, quite innovative measures to provide this support. And I think this is the essential thing so that we can see an end to the war. And then we will have to see how everybody contributes to supporting the recovery of the country.